There's a pattern that happens over and over again, and we're in a particular spot in the pattern. We're going to come through more difficult times. I think the next 3 to 5 years will be difficult times. A lot of these things happen once in a lifetime, and if you don't go back and see how they worked over time, then you're in trouble. So there's a pattern. I could describe the pattern, but there's a pattern that happens over and over again, and we're in a particular spot in the pattern. And then to understand it, not just because it happened before, but to understand mechanistically how it happens, and then one has a sense of how to deal with it. The three most important things that are happening in the world now are that we're at the end, late in a long-term debt cycle in which central banks cannot control monetary policy the same way. They can't lower interest rates. They can't get money to a lot of people who need the money in the traditional way. So just like in 1929 to 1932, there was a debt crisis that came as a result of an excessive amount of debt in the boom years. And then when you have that in 1932, we hit zero interest rates. And when they hit zero interest rates in 32, like in 2008, central bank prints money and buys financial assets. So what we're going through is the same process as happened in the 1930 to 1945 period. So as I was saying, there are three important things. That is one. The second is large wealth gap. Third is that we have a rising power in the form of China emerging to compete or challenge the United States leadership. So when you have these three things together, it's a challenging mix, and it's happened repeatedly. Less effective monetary and credit system makes it, they have to print a lot of money, can threaten the value of money. Second, when you have a large wealth gap and you have an economic downturn, people are more inclined to have conflict. So how that's dealt with, we're going to reconsider how we're going to, that wealth will be divided, and that'll change taxes and relationships. And then the third is we're no longer in a world order where the United States is the only dominant power. These three things existed, and the most important things existed. And then we had the downturn in terms of the virus. So you could think of the virus like being a tsunami that came, and if it went, and if we had no more of it, it still would have left a lot of economic damage. So in all different ways. So the economic damage has to be understood and dealt with. If you understand this, then you understand, well, there are three things. The first is look at your income, your expenses, and your savings, and then do a stress test so that you get yourself secure. If you were to lose your income, or if the income were to fall beyond a certain level, and you play that out, maybe that means you go get unemployment insurance, or whatever. How long can you live in an acceptable lifestyle? And do you have a saving that is adequate for that? Okay, so what you do is you calculate, if I lived in a simpler lifestyle and I had this amount of earnings, how many months or years could I live acceptably? Then you look at what do you put the money in? What do you save in? That what history has shown us is that when things get difficult, people get stressed, they can get angry, and they could all fight with each other. And that produces the next leg of a terrible economy, because the economy won't work efficiently if people are fighting with each other. The system doesn't work well. So one would have to say, who's going to bring the country together behind sensible, I would say, bipartisan programs? Because if you don't have that, then you have a form of revolution, and you don't have good management. And that's the greatest risk, I would say, politically. All currencies eventually die, and all empires eventually diminish in their other empires. And the question is essentially the pace of how that happens. I think that, but for most of your listeners, it's most likely going to happen in a way that's tolerable if you can manage it well. Think about the decline of the British Empire, and you see people who are living in London and so on. It's not that the world blows up, it's that they have to readapt, and they know how to readapt. And so I think that we're going to come through more difficult times. I think the next 3 to 5 years will be difficult times in ways that haven't existed in their lifetime, but has existed in other periods of time, like the 1930 to 45 period. So to be able to adapt well, to invent yourself again, to adapt and to navigate that maybe with a perspective of knowing what those other times were like is the best thing to do. So the reason I'm doing that series on LinkedIn is to help people understand what those times are like and then help them be prepared. The reason I wrote the book Principles is so that it's a particular approach, because the same things happen over and over again for basically the same reasons. And once you get that and you have the self-discipline to know how to play the game well, then you'll be fine.